Okay, we're just about done with our time value of analysis. We got really two more things to talk about. One of them are called perpetuities. Kind of weird. Most people don't come into contact with those in their daily life. And then we're going to talk about uneven cash flows. But you have all the skills right now to do all of this stuff. So let's take a look at what are perpetuities first, because that's a pretty easy discussion for us. I'll go ahead and remove my picture. A perpetuity is simply an annuity that lasts forever. And these do exist. You can get these, and sometimes you hear about them. Um, payments for life. Well, even those don't last forever, but there are such things as perpetuities. Sometimes they can be set up um, in a trust. Maybe a large trust is giving to a school in perpetuity, if I could say that, a certain amount of money to fund their activities. So hopefully that those would go on forever. Um, but it's an annuity that goes on forever. There is no end. Those payments continue throughout all time. Wouldn't we love to have one of these? And it's the simplest of all calculations. Now, we're going to be looking at the present value of a perpetuity. Oops, before we get on to that one. And it's a very simple formula. You just take that payment that you're getting, let's say, for example, $100, and you can follow me along with a very basic calculator if you like. A $100 payment, and you divide it by I. Remember, I is the interest rate. Let's pick 6%. I don't think I've ever done anything with 6% yet so far. So let's do 6% and use a decimal point to write that. So 6% is 0.06. And come up, do your division on that. And you get $1,666.66 is the present value of that particular perpetuity, that $100 at 6%. You simply take the payment, divide it by the interest rate. Make sure your interest rate's in a decimal form, and there you go. You got the answer. Very simple. So what's the value? What's the future value of a perpetuity? Well, that's one that's going to put you in meltdown because there is none. Because it goes on forever. There is no end date. You'd have to actually have remember that timeline? You'd have to have the timeline end, and that's not part of the definition of a perpetuity. So if you do it, your calculator explodes and your Samsung Galaxy catches on fire. So you don't don't bother to worry about that one. That won't be might be a trick question or a question on a test. Can you calculate the future value of a perpetuity? The answer is false. You can't. So there you go. Perpetuities. Don't come into contact with them that often, but it may have some applications for you in some time value analysis. All right, so let's take a look at a couple other things real quickly here and kind of wrap it all up. Uneven cash flow streams. So now you're going to take all the skills that you've learned, the discounting, forwards and backwards. Remember, you can go forwards and backwards in time. You can pick cash flows at different periods and calculate them. Now you can do uneven cash flows, and you can even do cash flows going in and going out. Just remember to keep your signs correct. Make sure you're using negatives when it's, let's say for example, cash flow going out in this case. So um, here is kind of this broken down. This is where if you are getting a problem with uneven cash flows, different than the annuity, remember those are all equal and even, and you can plug those in very nicely into that calculator and do that. For these uneven ones, you actually have to work on each one individually and come up with the answer. I'm just going to pick a couple of these because you know how to do this stuff. But let's say, for example, let's pick on the period 2, the $300, and see how they found that. So we have a cash flow of 300, and we're bringing this back to the present value. So I'm using future value, 300. We have time periods. Now let's go back and make sure I've got the right time periods. This is what I want to make, not to mess this up. So we have two time periods. Two time periods. We have, I'm not going to do a payment amount because it's not an equal thing. Make sure I have I got that check mark on the end. I'm going to double check that. And I believe we are at 10%. Let me go back and check, make sure that was at 10. Yes, 10%. Okay. So let's calculate the present value on that. And again, I didn't signage error. Kind of positives are negatives, the negatives are positives. There we go. $274 and some change. Is that correct? Yes. Perfect. A little bit of rounding error depending on the calculator. It looks like it's a penny off, but that's pretty good. Let's calculate that one. The one that's probably causing you some anxiety is this negative in here. Um, and how many periods is it? We got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it's 4. $50. We want to discount that back. So we're going to bring that to 0. In this case, I'll put 50. Negatives are positives and positives are negatives. So this one I'll make sure to leave it as is. We have 4 time periods. Okay. And interest rate, and let's compute the present value. Negative 34.15. In this case, I want to keep that negative. Excellent, right in there. So I've just discounted these uneven cash flows back to 0, back to the start of time for this particular endeavor. You could add those all up, and you can now have what's called net present value on all of those cash flows. See, isn't that powerful? You can now take uneven cash flows, and this is more realistic in a business world. Things are going to be maybe in the beginning not so good. There's going to be a lot of cash going out. Then things get better, and you're going to start really bringing in the cash. You can bring those all back to a single point in time. Now, the return on these investments, you might hear that term used, return. That is really the measurement is that term used for return, the return on this particular investment. Time value analysis is really critical to calculating investment returns. And that can be both in terms of dollars or in the rate of return or discount rate. Remember, those are all kind of synonymous. But in this case, the rate of return on those particular investments. So remember, we use time value analysis. It can also help us to find the rate of return on an investment, which we haven't gone through in this particular lecture, but that is another tool of time value analysis. We have focused on the dollar terms, which I think are more important for this particular module. We will look at calculating those interest rates or those rates of returns from given projects at a later time. But let's wind this up with one more example. We're going to look at, this time I'll pick on the MRI folks, and let's look at evaluating a new MRI scanner. So we've got this scanner, and it is going to generate some investments here. Let's say scanners cost millions of dollars, but let's just say, well, we could always put an extra 0 behind all of these. But let's just say you're doing an upgrade to an MRI. You're adding something to it. It's going to be doing more 3D rendering or something like that. And that upgrade is going to cost you $1,500, but you anticipate these additional revenues coming in. These are positive uh, cash flows, but uneven, so you can't use any of those annuity formulations with that. So that's where these numbers come from. You have your initial cash outlay for your MRI upgrade, and then you have these, what you hope will be additional revenues coming into you over the next 4 years. So, do we simply do this? $310, $400, $500, $750, calculate uh, our initial cash outlay, and then make our decision on our simple dollar return. Now, you know better now. You know that this doesn't make sense because $750 4 years from now is not worth $750 today. You know you need to discount that back. So this simple dollar return really isn't the best way to look at things. You're better than that now, right? You can kick it up a notch. You can do actually what's called discounted cash flow dollar return, or that same principle that we used for the uneven cash flows and discounting each one of those back. I'm not going to go through that. You know how to do that. You know how to bring $500 back to the present value with using a return. We're going to use an assumed return of 8%. Now the question is, where did that 8% came and where does that come from? Well, that goes back to that art and science of finding the correct discount rate, of a similar type of situation or investment with similar risk. You would want to find that discounting factor interest rate to apply to the to the problem, to the situation that you have on hand. Now, maybe people over at General Electric or who make a lot of these scanners kind of know that maybe 8% is the rate that you want to use. That's 10, and maybe it's technically has shown to work for most situations. So that's where it comes from. That's the where you get paid the big bucks is to find out to pick that 8%. If you picked it wrong, well, then you're fired. But because in this case, if you look at it, is the scanner worth it? Is the scanner worth it? Well, just barely. It's $78 net present value after you take in your initial 1500. So you have to ask yourself, is the training, I mean, you probably have to train some people on this thing. Is there other, untangible negatives to this situation or positives too? I mean, maybe it brings in more people to the hospital to do different things that earn more money. But you can see here that it's not necessarily, I mean, it's pretty close, but it is. At least it's positive net present value, and you get to keep your job. So that kind of covers some of the basics here. You've been able to do a lot of different things with these cash flows, bringing them forward, bringing them backwards in time, uneven cash flows, and using that website and that cash flow calculator. I will speak very briefly here before concluding with this lecture about some of the other apps out there for your phone, which will do the same thing, and they're pretty nifty to have, and some of them are free or only a few dollars. I mean, you can go to the Android store or to the Apple App Store and just type in financial calculators. Some can be rather expensive, like $10 to $15. Don't go that route. You can find some free ones out there. You know what to look for now. When you look at the apps, you want to find the ones that are pretty simple, that have these kind of the PV, the FV future value, the N, the payment, the I or IR on there. And almost all of them will. Some of them have some pretty kind of wonky, weird layouts, though, so you want to skip those. Something to look for is kind of a standard, and this was set by, I want to say, Hewlett Packard when they made calculators, and I think they still do. But there was a standard in the business where the HP calculator was the one that you had if you were in finance. But you want to look for something called a BI2 or BII emulator or simulator, and you'll find that on a lot of the apps out there. So just put in, 10 BII was the name of it. Don't know the reasoning behind that. And you can find a lot that are pretty user friendly out there. So but they're a lot of buttons, because they can do some pretty powerful things beyond what we're doing here. But I wanted to throw that out there for those of you that want to get the app on their phone. Otherwise, we're going to try to use the free or the web-based calculators that are out there, like the one at Arachnoid that we've been using throughout these presentations. All right, well, that concludes this lecture on the discounting of uneven and unequal cash flows.